All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Stu and the Nunn 333 tonight. Anyways, I'm really excited tonight to welcome a new guest, someone we've never had on before, but one that I've made through. I want to welcome you to the show.
Well, thank you, Troy. It's a pleasure being there.
Awesome. Well, hey, we'll start. People are like, okay, who is this guy? What does he do? What are we talking about tonight? So they'll probably figure all that out just by as you go through your background and bio and kind of introduce yourself.
Okay. Well, my name is Preston Schleinkofer. I have 22 years in military service, active Guard and Reserve, military, police, PSYOP, and NBC. I retired as a E7 platoon sergeant in the year 2000. And so I retired quite a while ago. Did that for 22 years. And then while I was doing that, I also have served as a U.S. Border Patrol agent for 16 years and in ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, as a deportation officer, supervisory deportation officer. And I did that for 11 years. Border Patrol down in Laredo, Texas. I did my time in mostly in Laredo North, but then also 1 year in Laredo South before I transferred to ICE. And I became a deportation officer in San Antonio and did the gamut of activities down there. Since I was fresh Border Patrol agent and I had a lot of connections down there, I was made the juvenile coordinator for all the sectors in our region who caught unaccompanied children or family units, and they went through my office, or my desk, I should say. And I also did fugitive operations for about 3 years. And then I also did some intelligence work in our holding facilities, where we would interview aliens who were getting ready to be removed, and we would try and glean information from them as a last ditch before they were no longer in our custody. And later on, I was lucky enough to be selected as doing the same basic job, but for the headquarters element of ICE intelligence. And so I worked 7 years with intelligence. My last, before my career ended in 2015, and so that pretty much covers in just a quick overview of what I've done. But like we've talked about before, I started a podcast of my own a few years ago. It's Civil Defense Radio. You can find it at civildefenseradio.com or any of the podcast apps. You'll find my past shows. There are a variety of topics. It's everything from preparedness all the way up to the many threats that I see to our safety and security as a nation. And one of the reasons why I did that, Troy, was because I saw a lot of things happening, and what I saw, I didn't really like, because, I'm 66 years old. I grew up in an era that had civil defense drills. Okay, sure, we were some of the last ones to do that, but we did when I was young. And so I remember all
the old climb under the desk and
duck and cover and all that stuff. So, we had that. And then what really brought it home was I was working headquarters ICE in the intel shop, and I was a supervisory deportation officer, detention and deportation officer, but I was also a section chief of an intel cell of a bunch of analysts. So part of my job was, if something happened in DC, I would move to or report to a secret location up in the Virginia mountains and continue operations. Okay. Well, I came home and told my brand new wife about that. And she goes, well, what about me? Wow. That was a slap in the face, because, I hadn't put that portion of it together. And I said, well, if something happens, you're going with me. And if they don't let you in, then I ain't going in either. So luckily we didn't have to put that to the test. But it caused me to take a serious look at what was available for the average citizen. And what I found was scary. All of our major adversaries, to include the Soviets, the Chinese, North Koreans, and to some degree the Iranians, they have active civil defense organizations. And they even have bunker systems to protect their populations. Mm-hmm. North Korea is famous for it. So, we had this thing called mutually assured destruction. Well, the only destruction would have been us in the United States because we didn't have anything. The only thing that there is for the elite, those special people like I did. I had that special card that would allow me access to the facility up in the Virginia mountains should something happen. I was privileged because of my duties and my job classification. So later on, I met this guy and he says, never trust a fat guy coming out of a bunker telling you he's here to help. So
that's good advice. Yeah, but it's funny you mention that because Zuckerberg's been in the news a lot. He's building this huge multi-million-dollar compound, I think, in Hawaii. We've heard of others that have those. Obviously, you see every movie from just about every James Bond movie or any other apocalyptic, the world's ending, asteroids hitting, whatever movie. There's always the rich people have some secret layer that they're all, in the Skull and Bone Society kind of club, where they can all, go and be in the next arc, if you would, to survive something and rebuild the world kind of thing. So it's obviously there are places like that our government has from the east to the west coast and probably beyond to make sure they continue operations.
Yes.
But yeah, it does put you in a special class just by virtue, maybe not of wealth, but by virtue of your position.
There's a book out there that talks about the bunker system that we have in the United States and how certain people, because of their financial status and connections to certain politicos, would be able to go and hunker down with the elite, of our government. It's called Raven Rock.
That's the name of the book.
Raven Rock. It's a fantastic read, but it is filled with information, and it goes back to the beginning of civil defense, and it gives a whole history of it and the reasons why we have these bunker systems and all that. But yeah, we have them from East Coast to West Coast, and they're not all of them are U.S. Government facilities. Some of them are corporate. Some of them are even state. Yeah.
I know. The government has sold off. Friends of mine that I was in the military with, we always joke about all buying one and moving in. But the old missile silos like in Wyoming and Idaho, you can buy them and turn them into this very tall underground home, right? If you would, and they have a lot of the infrastructure built in, right? Air handling and water and this and that, whatever. And sometimes they put those up for sale for people to buy. And all you see is a little concrete bunker on top with nothing else, and then below it is an entire secret layer, if you would. But hey, I want to take it back for a second before you started. You talked about your time in the military, 22 years, obviously a big commitment yourself. But as you look back now from that through your time with CBP and ICE and everything, did any of that, I'm sure you took obviously technical and soft skills from that, but was any of that indirect? Do you feel it prepped you or prepared you in any way for doing the job with CBP and ICE? I know you were an MP, so obviously there's some stuff like detainee operations and things like that. But did you work in any intel side in the MPs or anything else that kind of helped you, or maybe you made it an easier landing for you in CBP and ICE?
Well, funny you should ask that. My son, he was with the Oregon Army National Guard, and he deployed twice to Iraq, and he wanted to follow in my footsteps because what happened was I retired. A week later, he started with ICE, but he started in an admin job. But because his military training on intelligence prep of the battlefield, every soldier is a collector.
Yeah.
It gave him some awareness that other people didn't have, and he used that to his best advantage. And now he's a GS-13 criminal analyst with Homeland Security Investigations.
Okay. All right.
So yeah, there's things that you learn in the military, and I learned those same processes because, especially as an MP, we were taught to especially look for threats. Where the average, let's say if you're an infantryman, you're thinking about, the tactical, but if you're a support soldier, then you have that other aspect that you have to keep aware of threats coming towards you to knock you out, so you can't support the frontline infantry.
Right. You said your son deployed. Was he with 2162 when they went to Iraq in 2004? The battalion that went?
He supported the 101st.
Okay.
They were doing convoys, escorts, things like that,
Yeah, so I had some of my soldiers deploy with the battalion out of Oregon in 2004, and then I deployed I was working with the 41st Brigade out of Oregon in Afghanistan in 2006, 2007. So I wasn't sure if he worked.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'll have to check with him.
Yeah, so I've definitely chewed some ground with a lot of Oregon folks, but stay in contact with them too. But interesting, yeah. So one thing else too, you talk about CBP and ICE for the everyday person. What's the difference? Break that down what their missions are. Because a lot of people intermix them. They don't really know, right?
You're right. And they call, I hear people say CBP, and Border Patrol. CBP, when I was in, we were part of DOJ, Department of Justice. And then, INS was this big monstrosity, and they said that they needed to break it up to make it better. It almost sounds like this Build Back Better BS that we're being fed now. Well, when 9/11 happened, they sure came together real quick with this concept of Homeland Security. And I read somewhere years ago that this had been sitting on some senator's desk or bookshelf for quite a while, and they were just waiting for the perfect opportunity to put it into play. The Homeland Security created all the border agencies, created that CBP aspect, and then deportation and investigations. We were separated out and did we were part of ICE. Okay. So Customs and Border Protection is the umbrella. Customs and Border Protection officers are the guys in blue who work at the port of entry, the airports, and the seaports. Okay, those are those guys. They do customs and immigration duties both.
Right. They ask you what you're doing coming into the country. They what are you doing? How long are you going to be here? All that kind of stuff. Right.
Yeah. They took the immigration inspectors and customs inspectors and the USDA inspectors, and they combined them all together. And then they added Border Patrol in on that because we were a border entity as well. We always kind of, resisted. We would have rather have stayed independent from our, from them, or even gone with investigations.
It had to lead to a lot more bureaucracy.
I know it created a monster that was even bigger. And I think there's some in DC who want to create a national police force. And that's one of the reasons why we're seeing this attack on the cops right now. Defund the police, make them useless. And then people will have a groundswell of, give us some law enforcement. We need protection. Well, we'll do that from DC. Matter of fact, Nancy Pelosi has even alluded to that.
Yeah, we see what happens when the federal government controls a law enforcement agency, i.e., Capitol Police. right?
Yeah.
So and that could
J6.
be a whole other thing itself. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's like anything else. It's like when the government controls healthcare. Look at the VA, right?
Yeah.
You can anytime, President Reagan said many great things, but obviously one of the best ones was when he said, we're here from the government, we're here to help you. Don't ever trust that. I mean,
Yeah.
that's exactly what it was. But you've had no shortage of interesting positions and jobs, and one of them you talked about was working with the kids, and you were in charge of that for a while. And this was obviously, you retired what 2015 from
Yes.
all that. So way early before we, the famous like, look, we have kids in cages and which president did it and all that stuff. But working with that, obviously, I know from just my own experience on the battlefield when there's kids involved. When I've seen things here locally in a domestic situations and stuff and kids involved, it's just heartbreaking. How was it? Were there affirming moments? Were there things that lifted you up when working with kids? And also, I'm assuming there had to be things that just ripped your heart out and made it tough to go home at night.
Yeah, well, most of the time I didn't come into contact with them. They, what we did is we coordinated with Border Patrol units who delivered them to a Catholic Social Services representative or somebody else, and so that was that. There was a handoff there. But as the coordinator, I was responsible to go out to the different facilities, check on them, see how they were doing, and just make sure that the process that the facilities were going through were good, and they weren't losing kids or anything like that. We had our runaways.
How do you vet them? Because I know now there's the numbers coming across are staggering compared to what you dealt with, right?
Yeah.
But I'm also seeing what's being flown and driven and shipped all over the country. We have them here in my local community. They have saturated into our school district. I mean, there's some that are supposedly high schoolers that are carry, walk, talk, and act like they are full-grown adults, and all they have to go off of is whatever that person said. They go, I'm 17, and they're like, they obviously like 25 or 26. How did you guys, was there a way to do that and they just have gotten overloaded now? Or back then, did you kind of have to go off what it looked like and what they said and say, well, it looks about right?
Well, we were lucky in San Antonio because we had the Health Sciences University there and their dental department. They were able to age kids scientifically based on their teeth.
Dental records, yeah.
Yep. So whenever we had somebody of questionable age, we would take them over there. They would be inspected, and then we would get the best guess. And if they were over, then we put them in with the adults.
Right. I would imagine now they have no way to have the time to do that, especially when I know they're borrowing from the VA just to provide medical care.
Yeah.
The VA has pulled doctors out of VA hospitals just to do that. So, and they seem to be, I mean, better than I, and you probably have heard from people you've worked with, but they seem to be processing as fast as they can to get them in and out of there and not have them around. Now, were they doing, the when you had kids back then, and again, I know it was a lot less, but I mean, they weren't having to put them in temporary housing, i.e. cages or anything like that, right? You guys had... No,
we didn't have anything like that.
Right. You guys had more like dorm kind of things or tents or something like that. I imagine you weren't having to just shove people.
Well, we had the nonprofits had facilities.
Catholic charities. Yeah.
The easiest way to describe it is, let's say everybody knows what an old folks home looks like. Okay.
Right.
We had facilities like that each room would have maybe 2 kids.
Right.
All right. And there would be rec areas, reading rooms, dining facilities, all that. All right. That's what we had back then. Kids in cages, that was only in certain places.
Gotcha.
All right. And that was sometimes in Border Patrol facilities that were just so overloaded that Obama allowed them to create these temporary holding places.
That's right. That would have been during your time.
Obama. It wasn't something that Trump created, but it was the publicity that the left wanted to put out there that Trump was doing this.
Right.
You know,
Well, I remember the pictures in there when they were circulating them during Trump years. It was like, nope, those are all from Obama's years.
yep.
And obviously people don't want to say that. So I didn't think
Yep.
about that. Yeah, you were during that time when they were having to do that. And the best I've heard is that, and correct me if, or, you can verify this, is that, they did that to, obviously they had no other way to segregate and keep adults away from minors. I mean,
Exactly.
they weren't putting them in dog kennels. I mean, they were putting them where they could keep them segregated so they weren't taken advantage of or abused or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly right. It was just for their safety.
Yeah.
But, Border Patrol facilities have these large detention center cells because we're used to catching a lot of males and putting them in there. All right. And then we pull them out as we're processing, and then we move them to another cell, knowing that we've already cleaned them. These ones are the ones that need to be cleaned yet, and then the whole process starts over again. All right. But when kids are interjected into that mix, you can't have a 12-year-old boy in with a bunch of adult men. You got to keep him separate. Right. And so he would be in a cell with other young boys, and the young girls would be in their own cell. It's right. Not, you can't keep them out in the room there where they can walk all over the place and just do whatever they want to do. You got to keep them contained. No, for many reasons. One, you don't know their health status, and you don't know what to expect from them.
Because, right. You put them in the general populace. I mean, even if you'd have to have eyes on all the time, 24/7.
Yeah.
To make, and even that wouldn't stop someone from getting attacked or assaulted or anything like that. I mean, it happens in prison, right? There are eyes on them all the time, and full riots break out right underneath the guard's eyes. They're not going to jump right in the middle of that.
Well, especially if the smuggler is part of the group that we have in the men's cell,
right?
And the kids, they'd be intimidated as soon as that guy comes out and he looks over at them. They'd clam up.
Right.
So,
right. That's a good point.
We can't use a kid as a material witness, but it gives us something to go on.
Right. So you worked intel. So how does that? I mean, what kind of was it? Were you trying to highlight the network? When you work intel and that kind of job, was it trying to find the smuggling routes and the people all involved, or trying to find out if anyone's a bad character that's coming in? Like, what kind of stuff, if that you can talk about, did you typically have to work on?
Well, one of the things that we did when we went in to talk with aliens in custody is we wanted to know who they were, who they hung around with, where they lived and things like that. Just get some background information that we may not have had a full picture of with the reports that we had. Okay, right. Let's say they were picked up in Dallas and shipped down to us. That doesn't tell us a whole lot. What we want to know is, were they involved with gang activity? Were they witness to any gang activity? Things like that. Who their smuggler was when they first came. All right, doing some background so that we can plug those names and locations in and see if there's any other aliens that have reported the same thing.
Right.
One of the things that we were looking for was information to shut down the pipelines. Okay, so if we could do that, then that was a plus. And I was part of an operation in headquarters when I was there. We did that. We were able to, I say we as a collective, because I did a small part, just being part of the unit. The analysts did the lion's share. I was an officer who saw things that an analyst doesn't necessarily see. So I was able to put in my input and
give them context and
that way. But we shut down operations down in Central and South America. We had an operation coming in from Brazil. They would land in Brazil and they'd get a free pass from a corrupt official there, and then they'd be put into a pipeline, and then they'd end up at the Mexican border. Well, that whole route we ended up shutting down. And I think somewhere like 300 people went to jail. So, wow. Yeah. It was the information that we gathered through interviews like that, through reports that special agents had done, our agents overseas had been able to gather, and their liaison with the officials in those various countries. And it was a huge operation, and it slowed things down for quite a while. But what's going on right now, these NGOs are a big part of the smuggling network, as well as our government.
I've heard, I want to definitely get into current times now, but I've heard the NGOs, right back, like you talked about the Catholic charities. I mean, I know several of my interpreters from Afghanistan, were able to get to the States before Kabul fell. And they obviously, the Catholic charities to put them up for the first few months and help them out when I went through this. So I know they've been very involved with that. But now I'm hearing that, and I've seen reports where representatives from the Catholic charities are literally, either dropping leaflets or publishing guidance or stuff on the web and telling them what to say when they get here, how to give up, what to say to get asylum, and are essentially coaching them not only what to do when they get here and get intercepted, but also what place to come through at. And all that kind of stuff. And they are really, and like you said, the government too. I mean, really, they're no better, right? Especially when they're flying them from their native countries all the way over the border into the U.S. and dropping them off and doing it secretly in the middle of the night. I mean, it's not like the NGOs are out there being, under the radar and trying to do this. Our government's doing it, knowingly and willingly. What is your thoughts on that? And what are you hearing from any of the folks that you're still in contact with that are serving?
Well, the guys that are still on the job, there's a lot of frustration there.
Dude, their morale has to be so low.
Yeah, it is, because I'll tell you, my time in the Border Patrol was a lot of fun. I didn't like where I was at on the border, but it was a great job. And, I look fondly at my time in the patrol. It was adult hide and go seek. They would hide, we'd seek, or we would hide and wait for them and jump out in front of them and scare the crap out of them. Okay. It was fun. I mean, chasing them and down the rail lines when they're trying to jump on a moving train, catch them at the riverbanks, catching dope coming across. I mean, those are some fun times, high adrenaline, but most of my information comes from reporters like at the Epic Times, from Michael Yon on Substack. Michael is doing the Lord's work, man. He's got some good information. He's a former SF guy who turned combat journalist, and man, he talked about the Darien Gap before it was a regular name, before anybody knew about it. Right.
So I mean, like I say, the morale's got to be. I mean, anyone that is out there. I mean, the reports I've heard and people I've talked to is, a lot of these agents down there that were there. I mean, especially ones dealing with this mass influx over the last several years, they were obviously working crazy hours, right? They're 15, 16 hours a day, not being with their family or anything like that, not able to even just decompress. So a lot of them were spending out of their own pocket to bring stuff for the kids and for the families that their hearts went out to, and that kind of stuff. And, and then just have your upper management, right, all the way up to the president, just not support you, say tons of lies that you see on TV and all the news shows, or they come down there. And I know what it's like to have the higher echelons come down. I knew it from the Army myself, like you and stuff. When, the generals come down, everyone paints every rock and cuts every blade of grass and don't say this and make sure you say that, and everybody mind their P's and Q's. It's got to be the same exact way when Mayorkas or anyone else comes down to, well, he's pretty much the one who comes down to the border, but that the only people that are going to get near him or ask a question are going to be the ones that they know are towing the line, and the rank and file who are out there suffering every day don't get a chance. I mean, there's just got to be some, hat throwing and dirt kicking and the morale. They got to really question what they're doing and why they're doing it, why they're ruining, destroying their lives, personal and probably physical, their physical and spiritual, mental health for this job that no one even cares about.
Sometimes when those high officials like the chief of the Border Patrol show up, at the station just for a quick visit, they get an earful. There's been a couple times when the chief of Border Patrol showed up and he wasn't happy when he left. And some of that stuff has been put out on video. But I mean, Border Patrol and CBP, they're trying to cut all that stuff out, keep us from being able to learn about what the guys are hearing and what they're saying out there. Matter of fact, their OPR is even going after some of these guys for speaking out, and it's really bad when there's this type of corruption going on in a law enforcement organization. There's a bad problem, because this is all against the law. These guys, they're doing things not because it's lawful, but it's because they can get away with it and nobody can hold them account. Even Congress can't necessarily hold them account because there's not enough of them.
How many times have they tried to impeach Mayorkas, and they shoot it down every time, and the guy just smirks at them. But I mean, I imagine most people don't go well beyond 20 or whatever the retirement age is. I imagine a lot of them, when they hit it, they're in and they're gone. Yeah. Like they don't do it much more in a day over. That's
right. Most of them are jumping out early. As soon as they can, they clock out.
I mean, there's a lot of years left in their life. They can go on to other places. And I mean, I know a guy that retired from the Secret Service, and he works as a contractor helping with, federal prisoner escorts. To the federal prison nearby and that kind of stuff. And he's, getting his Secret Service retirement, but he does that too. And helps out, works with the marshals and does that kind of stuff and as a side gig, besides, any kind of security advisor, any kind of, I mean, there's tons of things to do.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff. But it's, I got to imagine people have what we would call in the Army, right, a short timers calendar and just counting the days down.
Yeah.
How's it for you? I mean, you worked in those years, including to the Obama administration, when you saw a lot of the stuff happening, and just thinking back over I guess let me ask you this: if knowing what you know now, if you could turn back the clock and you have an opportunity to apply to go to work for CBP and ICE and do all that, would you do it all over again?
I would, because of the guys I met. I mean, I met some of the greatest guys, just like in the military.
Right.
You make friends that you'll have for the rest of your life. I see on social media these guys meeting down in Laredo, and they get together for breakfast. And I wish I could go down there and hang out with them for a couple days or a week or so. Just to catch up on what's going on. But it's a camaraderie,
Right.
The Border Patrol, we always said that we were the Marine Corps of the federal law enforcement, because there's a Border Patrol in almost every government organization. And we were the most military type of organization that went through Federal Law Enforcement Training Center.
Yeah, went to FLETC outside of DOD. Yeah, and some of the stuff. What are you in looking at it now? I mean, and looking what they're going on. I mean, you see what Texas did, right? Texas took control of that park.
Yep.
DPS is doing anything. What's your thoughts on that? I mean, obviously there was a lot of court things of the federal government trying to say, well, it's not Texas. It's not the responsibility as per the Constitution, but then Texas said, well, you're not doing it, and we have the right to maintain our own border in our own state.
Yeah. Well, I'm on Abbott's side. I think he and his attorney general have basically made the argument that the federal government's not doing it. So they have to, because it's their duty as state officers to do that.
For the state, yes.
To protect their state and their people, their citizens. So I think that's why the Supreme Court, one, they don't like seeing that stuff, but at the same time, I think they, most of them anyways, they feel for Texas and what's going on.
But I think Supreme Court's ruling was on, right? Yes, the Constitution says that's the responsibility of the federal government, but nowhere does it say that the states can't also provide for their own.
That's right.
You know?
That's right. Well, the 10th Amendment,
right,
it gives the states sovereignty.
Right.
So
if they're not doing it, they have the right to. And interestingly enough, the federal government backed down, right? They did not push it. They have, I think Texas still controls that park, and they won't let federal agents in there. And as Governor Abbott said, hey, we've got this part covered. Go cover something else. This is secure.
Yeah. Well, it was being abused by the Mayorkas regime, and our tax money goes to support the United Nations, and the United Nations is one of the major funders of all this stuff that's coming in. This is not just some aliens who want to come to America. These people are being recruited from overseas. These people are not the average alien that I ran into in my 16 years in the Border Patrol.
Well, it's funny you say that, right? They've said these people come across and say they're persecuted and starved and can't get anywhere, can't get a job, yet they come across pretty chunky and usually with a phone in their hand and a backpack full. I think somebody said one time on one of the shows, if they're truly escaping that, they're coming in with nothing. Their clothes on their back and nothing else. And not a North Face backpack full of stuff and a phone and a fat belly full of food.
Well, if they went through even 2 countries before they got here, they had the ability to apply for asylum in those 2 countries.
Right.
And they didn't. They were coming here. So that means that they're ineligible to apply for asylum here because they had 2 safe countries that they could have stayed at.
It's interesting. I'm curious on your, I think President Trump has said that if he gets back into office, right, he is putting a plan together to round them all up and ship them back. I mean, it sounds great. I don't know what is that even feasible? I mean, this government essentially does not track any of these folks. They have just sent them to the 4 winds.
Well, I think there's a way. One, the phone that they're carrying, sure, I've heard that the phones are being sold and being transferred to other people and things like that. But when it comes down to it, if Americans want a safe country, which is what we're looking at some major violence coming up before the election, I'm predicting, and it's going to be the aliens, a lot of it, that and our homegrown leftists. But if we want a safe country, we're going to report these aliens or suspected aliens, and I'm saying aliens, not immigrants. An immigrant is a special class of alien, all right? They're all aliens, all right? Illegal aliens. So they're going to report them, which means that with 287G and whatever else comes along, where the local sheriffs and police are deputized to make arrests for immigration violations, then they will be able to assist in bringing those people into the system that we can use to get rid of them. So I believe it's possible. It's a Herculean effort because we've got so many millions of them here. We've got I thought we had 40,000 to 50,000 Chinese males here, but somebody else corrected me and said we've got more like 80 to 90 million Chinese military age males here.
You mean 1,000, not million, right?
Or 1,000, yeah.
Yeah. No, I saw that the numbers the other day. There was a hot topic last week as some stats came out showing how many in the last month and since the start of this year have come across, all Chinese nationals, right? Obviously, it's one thing if they trek their way up from somewhere from South or Central America, but we're getting people from all over the place, and whenever a reporter, and there's pretty much only one network that sends people down there, but whenever they go down there and talk to people, they just walk down the line, and it's Venezuela, Somalia, Ukraine, China. It's everywhere but Mexico. It's everywhere from anywhere but El Salvador, Nicaragua. Those people have already come, right? I think all those have come. Now they're just feeding the pipeline from all overseas. And an interesting thing is we've talked about on this show is and something that has not gotten a lot of press. It got some a little while ago, but is the northern border and how popular that is. All the agents. I mean, like I say, I know a number of people that have to go do their tour, even though they work the northern border. They have to go down and do like 2 or 3 months in somewhere in the southern border. But nobody's watching the northern border. And what the intel that I've gotten from some great folks in the agencies is that the cartels have offices set up in Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, at least here on the eastern side of Canada. I don't know what on Vancouver and that kind of side, but they have operations set up there, and it costs them a fraction to fly someone from Mexico to Canada, and then they're given so much time in Canada anyways, and then the cartels just take them right across the border or across the river or whatever it is, and into a lot of times into Indian reservations, because the rest is take them right in because they're sovereign themselves. Was that ever something that was kind of on the intel back when you were in? Was that something you guys were watching? Was it even like was it that bad?
Yeah, I was working on something when I was at headquarters, and there were some smuggling cases that we came across that pointed towards an Indian reservation outside of Detroit. And so we were working with the special agents up there and trying to feed them information as fast as we could gather it, and help them to stem that flow. There was, we had agents in Canada working liaison with RCMP and the Canadian immigration. I can't remember what it's called, but with their version of immigration. And so, gathering all this information and getting it to the people who were on the ground and needed it, that's what we did. And so there was a lot of that. Plus, before coming up to headquarters, I was still in San Antonio working headquarters ICE, and we were out supporting all the local law enforcement organizations. I went down to Tucson and worked for about 10 weeks, and we were working on an operation down there on an Indian reservation in Veckle Valley, south of Phoenix. And so down actually south of Casa Grande, if anybody knows where that is. So it's there's information out there. We've been attacking it as much as we can. Indian reservations have sovereignty, but at the same time, there's certain things that we can do. But we had a load of dope come across, and these guys had guns. And so during this operation that we were doing, and we ended up in a big old car chase with these guys, and Bortac, they came in with their dog and helos and we tried tracking them down, but we never came up with anybody. We found the dope, we found guns, but the people just we never caught.
Yeah. I think the numbers I heard was where it's roughly $10,000 a person to come across the southern border. It's about 3,000 on the northern border.
Yeah.
And if they don't come across in the wintertime, they come across. Now there have been reports here in the state of New York in the early spring this year of when it's kind of hit some of the mainstream media. We covered it last year, but it hit the mainstream media around January, February, of landowners and stuff in northern New York, finding frozen people, either one finding gear and clothes and all that stuff just strewn about, kind of like the ranchers do in Texas.
Yeah.
Right. But they were finding, and they were also finding people that were frozen to death. They got them across the border, and they were dropped them in upstate New York in the middle of winter. And they came out of some South or Central American country. They didn't stand a chance.
No.
But a lot have made it through. And what I've heard is that the big number of illegals that we see in New York City are not from Abbott and Texas and Florida flying them up there, busing them up there. It's because they're coming across from the northern border and they're doing a straight shot down I-87 right into the city. They're getting a Greyhound or getting whatever, and they're coming across. That's why you see so many packed on the sidewalks, and every hotel is full that the city has commandeered in New York City. They're not ones that are being bussed up. Those are just the ones that the news sees.
Right. Well, what people don't understand also is Canadian immigration laws are much more lax than ours. So just about anybody, even Osama bin Laden, could go into Canada and ask for asylum.
Right.
And then once they're there and they got those asylum documents, then, all they got to do is head south. And they're in New York or Chicago or wherever they want to go.
Right.
Because there's, those documents give them the ability to cross the border.
Right. Yeah.
There's.
What do you think the biggest thing is the American people don't know about what's going on the border? Because everything that's covered in the news is covered on Fox or any of the other ones that cover. There's not really many others, right? One American News and a few others. But what do you think is probably the biggest surprise people don't realize or shock?
One is the amount of people that we actually have here that are illegal, and two, the complicity of our government and politicians and not only NGOs, but corporations, major corporations that support all this globalization. These people are deliberately bringing people here to change the demographics. They did it in Europe 10 years ago, and it has made a major shift there. There's Europeans that are ticked off, and you're starting to see a lot of this stuff because the globalist ideas that Germany and Netherlands and some of these other places, France, are doing, their people are getting ticked. And so
there's countries in Europe that are not taking immigrants anymore. I mean, Poland is getting famous for not taking any.
And
Poland won't take any Muslim immigrants at all.
Yeah.
But a lot of them are getting. They're turning against all the stuff that our progressive country is still like. They're turning against electric vehicles. They're turning against all this immigration coming in, and they're trying to regain some of their sovereignty. Which is funny because most people look at Europe as this, welcoming everyone, loosey-goosey kind of, New World Order kind of test bed. And in reality, a lot of them, they are not politically correct in Europe. Anyone that's ever been overseas will know the political correctness is not there like it is here.
Well, the rapes of women have gone sky high over in Europe. You don't hear about it because they keep it suppressed. But it's the Muslims. When you bring in so many Muslim men into a country without Muslim women being brought in as well, where are they going to go? They're going to go, and because they're taught that these women are subservient to them,
right? They
can do whatever they want, especially when they see a Western woman that's walking around with, so much skin exposed. They see her as a harlot. So they're going to take advantage of her. Well, a lot of things are happening. We're going to see some terrible things here as well, because the people that they've brought here, I'm not saying allowed to come, I'm saying brought. These people are deliberately brought here, and we're going to be seeing a lot of violence. We're going to be seeing, not just leading up to the election, but when Trump wins, we're going to see even more afterwards, because the left are going to use these guys as their street soldiers, just like they did Antifa and BLM. I had some people that I worked with in ICE. Some wonderful, wonderful black ladies that were totally bought into BLM propaganda. Matter of fact, so much so that when I tried explaining to them the Marxist genealogy, they blocked me.
Yeah.
So,
These are people you worked with and knew, and then
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Because I mean that's unfortunately the way a lot of folks, not everyone on the left is, they don't want to talk facts. They block you, they yell over the top of you, they scream in your face, they just, or they, like I say, most time on social media, they block you and kick you off. They don't want to have a factual conversation.
Yeah.
That relies on truth and that kind of stuff. They want to just make up the facts or what they're told to, and that's just it. Which always we say all the time, right? The people with the coexist stickers are the people that least likely want to coexist.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. They want their way and only their way.
Right. They have all those religious symbols on there, but God forbid you try to exercise the most popular religion, Christianity, which is one of the symbols on there, and they, it's everything against you. But yeah, it is. I agree that that there people are gonna. I mean, it could very well get bad because if Trump wins, they're going to see the handouts and all that stuff are going to end. And, these entitlements that they're just, giving free phones, free hotels, free food. I mean, and just put up. And these people, I don't know there's no end game, right? What I see, there's hotels all around where I live full of illegal aliens that are put up and paid for by New York City, even though I'm 7 hours away from there. And they're feeding them, they're housing them, their kids are in our schools. I don't know what the plan is. I mean, they can't keep them in those hotels forever. And, you're just going to dump them on the street. There's bicycles, there's basketball hoops, there's strollers, stuff strewn all over the parking lots, right? No respect for the stuff that's just given to them. And, I don't know what they're going to do one day. They're going to bring in the riot police and just push them out the door. And then where do they go? It's going to do nothing but add to the crime.
No, they're just going to wait until it's time to push them out in the street to cause the chaos and mayhem that they were designed to do. And once that happens, they don't care what happens to the people that they brought here. They're just being used for a specific purpose.
They're pawns.
They're being used to transition this nation into a globalist petri dish. They're trying to bring us down to a third world status so that we will be nothing but a bunch of fodder for the globalists, who will go out and do our duty to grind away to support their lifestyle. They're going to have air conditioning. They're going to have gas-powered vehicles. They're going to have steaks, but they're going to have us eating bug protein. They're going to have us with 15-minute zones that we can't leave because our central bank digital currency won't work outside of our 15-minute zones. So we'll be penniless. Then they're going to use those programmable dollars in order to tell us that we have to spend this way or that way, not on the things that we want. If we want to go on to a vacation, they're not going to allow us because that would require, getting too much freedom in order to do that. This whole thing is, all we have to do is look at a few movies that Hollywood's produced, Hunger Games, Divergent. That's the utopia that these globalists see. Where
people may listen to what you're saying and think, okay, this guy's on the edge. He doesn't know, he's talking all this kind of stuff. But let me I'll bring it up to folks, right? And look at what the banks are doing now with gun and ammo sales.
Yep.
Right? All the major credit cards have now have a special category, and they can flag and they can give to the government who's buying guns, who's buying ammo on credit. You have to buy it on cash, right? And people say, okay, it's whatever, you feel how you want on guns. But let's look at a good example also is of what happened in Canada with the trucker protests.
Exactly.
Right. When they tried to raise money, the GoFundMe's and the crowdsourcing sites shut down the people that are trying to raise money to provide for those truckers, provide food and all that kind of stuff. They just don't allow it. Nope, you can't use our site for that. So, I mean, for those that are listening and watching may think, okay, Preston is kind of, he's one of those guys just talking about stuff. The signs have been there and the groundwork's already being laid, right? It's guns and ammo today. Who knows what it is tomorrow? You want to go buy I live in the state of New York. You want to go buy that gas stove? Nope, that's going to be illegal. You can't buy a gas stove. You can't exercise free will. Oh, you want to buy a gas vehicle? Nope, you live in this place. It's got to be electric only. I mean, you talked about 10th Amendment earlier. I'm all about 10th Amendment. And there is such an overreach of the federal government trying to instill whatever it wants onto the free will of the people and the capitalism of that this country's been on built on to buy what you want and live how you want. I mean, I don't even like HOAs. I consider that one of the first things. I'm like, I will not live in a place that has an HOA. You know, I lived on military base, so I lived on the ultimate HOA.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't need a post-army major come by telling me I got, you know, my grass is too high.
Yeah.
So, but
yeah. Well, I live in a lakeside community, and you can't live in a lakeside community without an HOA. So I'm guilty as charged, I guess. But
you got to find you got to find a more rural lake. I mean,
that's kind of hard to find. But you know, I have a good support network where I'm at. So
good.
You know, a friend of mine, another friend of mine says, you know, stock up, group up, train up, arm up.
That's
practice.
That's
you know,
it.
So, you know, I get people give me the side eye when I start talking about some of this stuff too. All they got to do is start researching things themselves.
Yeah, believe what's fed to them.
Not being plugged in or watching the mainstream media too much. Even Fox News is mainstream media.
Right.
So go to Epic Times, read some of their stuff, okay, and look at what's going on in Europe right now.
Yep.
Because if it's happening in Europe, I used to say 3 to 5 years. It's like 12 to 15 months. It'll start happening here.
Yeah.
So they're already pushing this green agenda. The WHO, what are they trying to do? They're trying to take over our sovereignty as a nation and as individuals with this new pandemic treaty.
Right.
And Biden, he's already agreed that he's going to abide by it.
Yeah.
So that's not. It has to be a treaty, and it has to be ratified by the Congress, by Senate. I mean, so if Biden accepts it, he's violating the Constitution.
And that's already happened. That's already happened 10 times over for sure with a lot of other stuff. But hey, we got to get wrapped up, Preston. I want to thank you so much, man. We covered a lot. CivilDefenseRadio.com is your site. I've been scrolling on the bottom. I want to thank you so much for coming on, for your military service, for your service to our country and our defense. It's been an honor having you on and meeting you. And this was phenomenal. I mean, you bring so much experience and info into the space beyond what just the talking heads do for 30 seconds at night, right?
Well, thank you.
And you know, we didn't get a chance about working with our good friend Cameron Hamilton and his campaign there in Virginia 7. We didn't get a chance to get on that, but something tells me I'm probably going to have you on again. So if you'll make it happen. But awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much, Preston. Appreciate it, and I wish you a good night.
Thank you. God bless.